everyone, my name is Emanuela.
And I'm Robert. Welcome to Tabletop Tutorials.
In this video, we are going to show you how to play Cerebria the Inside World. Cerebria is a dynamic, team-based, objective-driven area control game for 1 to 4 players or 1 to 6 with the Forces of Balance expansion. Set in a person's mind and reimagined here as a vibrant fantasy world, the game has players embody spirits who, with the help of willpower and ambition, move around Cerebria, place fortresses, and invoke, quell, and empower emotions in order to gain and maintain control of the frontiers and realms that make up this world.
In the middle of Cerebria is the origin, where spirits draw willpower and special bonuses from its spheres, and where the identity of the mind is shaped. During revelations, each side may score and add a permanent fragment to the identity through their fulfillment of common and personal hidden aspirations, though teams may also score public short-term goals known as intentions in order to shape this new mind toward bliss or gloom. Please find a link to Cerebria's page on both Board Game Geek and on Mindclash's website in the video description below. Let's look at how to set up the basic game. It is recommended that for your first couple of plays, you use this setup to allow everyone to better understand the fundamental concepts and mechanics that are used before moving to the full game, which employs some more advanced actions and strategies. For what is done differently to play the full game, please check the description for the timestamp of where that is discussed. First, you will need to separate players into 2 teams and then choose which side each team will play. One side will be bliss and one will be gloom. While some things will be hidden from the opposing team, you and your teammate are allowed to share any and all information with each other, as well as ambition. Emotion cards, essence, and willpower cannot be swapped between teammates. After placing the board on the table so that each team will be able to reach their deck locations, it'll be easiest with bliss to the right and gloom to the left of the main board. Attach the origin board to the center so that each sphere points to a realm as shown. For a better game-playing experience and to prevent repetitive starting game scenarios, it is important to randomly align each sphere with a realm. Next, place 7 willpower into each sphere. Place the remaining willpower into 2 supplies, one near each team, along with each team's essence counters. Even though intentions are not used in the basic game, Emanuela and I still recommend that you place your point counter on your respective Wheel of Intentions for the purpose of tallying up victory points at the end of the game.
Now, have each player choose the spirit that they wish to play from those available for their team. In the basic game, the spirit's powers are not used and can therefore be ignored during this selection phase. After selecting your spirit, take your matching spirit board from the supply and place it with the A side face up. Next, you will need your emotion card deck. So let's go over the emotion cards. Each card has its own vibe color, a number of essence spaces, intensity values, and power. Each mild emotion also tells you the strong emotion that it can be empowered to, and the minimum essence it needs to have in order for you to empower it. In the basic game, the empower action is not used, so the strong emotions can remain in the box. At the back of the rulebook is a list of starter mild emotion card decks that are team-specific. Spirit-specific decks are also provided, as well as deck-building rules should you choose to construct your own decks, but it is recommended that you use the team-specific decks in your first game. Should you choose to take advantage of the deck-building aspect of the game, each player may create their own emotion card deck consisting of exactly 16 mild emotion cards and no more than 2 copies of each card. After assembling your deck, shuffle and place each one on its respective location on the board. Note that each team has a deck that is marked with a symbol to aid in tracking player ownership of each emotion card, so ensure that one player has a deck of only marked cards and the other has a deck of only non-marked cards. Find the Common Aspiration deck and remove the Aspiration of Reflection and the Aspiration of Sensibility from it, leaving 7 cards. Shuffle these 7 cards and place them face up in a row near the board where everyone can see them. We usually place these above the main board. Take the 4 player order markers matching your spirits and use these to randomly determine player order. Play must alternate between teams, so the second player should be chosen from the team that does not already occupy the first player's spot. Place these markers in player order near the board for reference. We usually place these near or next to the common aspirations.
For your first game, everyone should take their spirit's miniature or standee and place it on the board as follows. One bliss spirit should be on the frontier space between the realms of the Land of Desires and the Willow of Values. One gloom spirit should be on the frontier space between the realms of the Land of Desires and the Network of Thoughts. The other bliss spirit should be on the frontier space between the realms of the Network of Thoughts and the Cradle of Senses, and the other gloom spirit should be on the frontier space between the realms of the Cradle of Senses and the Valley of Motives. The first bliss spirit's brightness card should be placed in its frontier triad adjacent to the Willow of Values. The first gloom spirit's bleakness card should be placed in its frontier triad adjacent to the Land of Desires. The other bliss spirit's brightness card should be placed in its frontier triad adjacent to the Cradle of Senses, and the other gloom spirit's bleakness card should be placed in its frontier triad adjacent to the Valley of Motives. Control of each area should now be marked as follows. Place frontier control markers matching the team whose spirit is on each frontier triad. One frontier will be neutral and will not receive a marker. The realms of the Valley of Motives and the Land of Desires should be given gloom control, and the realms of the Willow of Values and the Cradle of Senses should be given bliss control. The Network of Thoughts is neutral, so it does not receive a control marker. In lieu of placing spirits and starting emotions in the places shown in the rulebook as we just described, players may place them according to the following rules in player order. 1. Place a spirit on an empty frontier space. 2. Place a starting emotion on a realm slot within the adjacent triad. And 3. Place one essence from the general supply onto the first shaded essence space of the card. Finally, determine realm and frontier control and mark them as necessary. The main board is now set up and ready for gameplay. Let's now move on to setting up the spirit and team boards.
Now that the main board is ready, let's set up the spirit and team boards. Everyone should already have the spirit board that matches their chosen spirit. Ensure that the A side is placed face up, as only this side is used in the basic game. Take 4 Wild Vibe tokens and place them on the leftmost spot for the top 4 actions on your spirit board. Move, Invoke, Fortify, and Quell. Retrieve 4 Willpower and 2 Essence and place them on your spirit board to be your starting resources. You will then draw 2 emotion cards from your respective emotion card deck, and then make sure that the top card is face up. The top card on each deck will always be face up to allow each player to plan their strategy around the next card that they will receive. Whoever is first player will then take an additional 2 willpower and flip their action tracker to the inactive side, denoting that they are unable to use their absorb ability, which will be described later. Now that the spirit boards are ready, take your team's team board from the supply and place it between you and your teammate. It is important that this is within reach so that both of you can reference this shared board. Place 3 ambition tokens on the board face down in their designated spots, as none of these will be available at the start of the game. Next, take your team's hidden aspiration deck from the supply. As with the common aspiration deck, remove the aspirations of reflection and sensibility. Shuffle your deck and place it onto the designated spot on your team board. Without showing the opposing team, make sure that the top card of your deck does not match the current common aspiration at the top of the main board. If it does match, use the next card as your first hidden aspiration and shuffle the other card back into the deck. We usually keep our hidden aspiration deck above our team board with only the current hidden aspiration on the team board so that we do not have to worry about picking up more than one card or knocking over the deck as we reference what our current hidden aspiration is. Finally, after placing your team's minor fragments, major fragments, and capping fragment within reach, the setup for the spirit and team boards is complete.
On your turn, you will be able to perform a total of 3 actions. There is an action tracker at the bottom of your spirit board to make it easy to remember how many actions you have taken during your turn. We will return to this tracker to discuss it and its iconography in more detail shortly. Your 3 actions can come from the spirit actions available on your spirit board or from the realm actions on the main board. The first actions we will discuss will be the 5 realm actions. These actions are always available to you regardless of whether or not your spirit is currently adjacent to or in the respective realm. Let's go over each realm action starting from the top of the main board and working clockwise.
The Valley of Motives allows you to spend 1 willpower to gain 4 willpower from the general supply. The next realm action is that of the Cradle of Senses, which allows you to spend 1 willpower to draw an emotion card from your deck and then optionally spend 2 willpower for each additional card you wish to draw as part of the same action. The Network of Thoughts allows you to spend 2 willpower to move one of your team's emotion cards to an empty emotion slot adjacent to your spirit. Be sure to check if Realm and Frontier control changes after taking this Realm action. The Land of Desires allows you to spend 1 willpower to place 1 essence from your supply onto the leftmost free essence slot on one of your team's emotion cards that is adjacent to your spirit. You can spend an additional 1 willpower for each additional essence you wish to place onto the same card as part of the same Realm action. After using the Land of Desires, again it is important to recalculate control over any relevant frontiers and realms. Finally, the Willow of Values allows you to spend 1 willpower to exchange any number of additional willpower for an equal amount of essence.
If your team controls one of these realms, then you and your teammate can perform the realm's action for a discount of 1 willpower per action. This will make the Valley of Motives, the Cradle of Senses, the Land of Desires, and the Willow of Values cost 0 willpower. The Network of Thoughts will only cost 1 willpower. Any cost to perform the action further remains the same. For example, if Bliss controls the Land of Desires, then the first essence a Bliss spirit places will cost 0 willpower, but each additional will still cost 1. Let's now take a look back at the spirit board to go over the possible spirit actions.
In the basic game, there are 4 possible actions on each player's spirit board, all of which are immediately available. Each of these actions can be done in any order and have 3 upgrades that will be explained as we go over the action. When performing an action that has been upgraded, the base cost of the action must be spent in addition to the cost of the upgrade or upgrades being used. It is not necessary, however, to always use the upgraded benefit, nor is it necessary to upgrade or perform the upgrades in any order. More will be explained on this shortly.
The first action at the top is Move, which allows you to move your spirit to an adjacent space for 1 willpower. The only restriction is that you cannot occupy the same space as an opposing team's spirit, but you can share a space with your teammate. The first upgrade is Haste, which allows you to spend 1 additional willpower to move 1 additional space. Note that the upgrade allows your spirit to pass through a space that is occupied by the opposing team, but you cannot end in such a space. The second upgrade is Surmount, which, for the cost of 1 additional willpower, allows your spirit to occupy the same space as an opposing team's spirit. The final upgrade, which is the same for all spirit actions on side A of the spirit boards, is Determination. Determination is a 1 willpower discount for the base action's cost. It doesn't give additional discounts for upgrades. Remember that you can use any number of upgrades when you perform a spirit action, even 0, for the cost of the upgrade, but each upgrade can only be used once per action.
The second action is Invoke. Invoke allows you to place one of your emotion cards onto an adjacent emotion slot on the main board for a cost of 2 willpower, and then place an essence from your spirit board onto the leftmost free essence spot. Note that you cannot take this action if you do not have any essence on your spirit board. After taking an Invoke action, it is important to re-examine control over any relevant frontiers and realms. The first upgrade available for Invoke is Bolster, which allows you to spend 1 ambition to place 1 additional essence from the general supply onto the invoked emotion. The second upgrade is Inner Force, which, for the cost of 2 additional willpower, allows you to place the first essence on the invoked emotion from the general supply instead of your spirit board. The third upgrade, Determination, again is always the same on the A side and allows you to perform the action with a discount of 1 willpower.
The third action is Quell. For the cost of 2 willpower and 1 ambition, you can choose to remove 1 essence from an adjacent emotion card belonging to an opposing team by showing an emotion from your hand that has a matching vibe. Some important notes. First, the card that is shown is not discarded but returned to your hand. Second, any card can be shown to quell a brightness or bleakness emotion, as they do not have a vibe on their card. Third, if at any point the final essence is removed from an emotion, that emotion is removed from the board and placed at the bottom of the corresponding player's emotion deck. And finally, and most importantly, if you do not have any cards in your hand, or if your emotion cards do not match the vibe on the card you wish to quell, then you cannot perform this action. Subdue is Quell's first upgrade. Subdue allows you to spend 2 additional willpower to remove 1 additional essence from the quelled emotion. Quell's second upgrade is Extinguish, which allows you to spend 1 additional willpower to quell without having to show a card. This upgrade also allows you to quell if your hand is empty. Again, the final upgrade is Determination, giving you a 1 willpower discount.
The final action available during a basic game is Fortify. For 3 willpower, Fortify allows you to place a minor fragment onto a fortress location as long as the realm is not controlled by the opposing team, place a +1 counter onto the board in front of the fortress, and then recalculate control of that realm. A fortress has no bearing on frontier control. A couple of notes. First, if there are no more minor fragments available to your team because they are all either on the main board or on the identity, then you cannot take this action. Second, if the realm was neutral when the fortress was placed, then the realm is now under the control of the active team. The upgrades for Fortify are structured a little differently, working more like separate actions rather than small upgrades to Fortify, so we will have to be very clear as to how and when they can be used.
Fortify's first upgrade is Exalt. Exalt allows you to pay an additional 1 ambition to replace one of your team's minor fragments on an adjacent fortress location with a major fragment and flip the +1 counter to a +2, remembering to check realm control afterward. This has to be done to a minor fragment that is already on the main board and therefore cannot be done to one that is currently being placed. So to place a major fragment, you must fortify with a minor fragment and then, as a separate action, Exalt. As with the base Fortify action, if your team no longer has any major fragments available, then you cannot Exalt.
The second upgrade for Fortify is Raise. For an additional 1 willpower and 1 ambition, you may either remove an adjacent opposing minor fragment and its +1 intensity counter from the main board, or replace an adjacent opposing major fragment with a minor fragment and flip the +2 intensity marker to a +1. Because it deals with opposing fortresses, the Raise action ignores the base Fortify action's restriction of only being usable in a realm that is either neutral or controlled by the player's team. If the opposing team no longer has any minor fragments available, then you cannot use the Raise action on their major fragment. Once the Raise action has been completed, recalculate realm control. Raise is also unique in that it gives you an additional action on your turn. This can be any realm or spirit board action. Like with the other actions on side A, the third upgrade is Determination, which reduces the base action cost by 1 willpower.
In addition to the 5 realm actions and the 4 spirit board actions, there are 3 abilities that can be done at any point during your turn. On your turn, you can perform one or more of these abilities, which are essentially free actions. These abilities are Upgrade or Unlock a Spirit action, the Ambition abilities, or the Absorb ability. These abilities are free to do and do not count towards your spirit's maximum of 3 actions during your turn. It is possible to use these actions back to back in between your other actions on your turn, and it is possible to use some abilities more than once on a turn. The first ability we'll talk about is unlocking or upgrading a spirit action. Before doing a spirit action, you may unlock or upgrade that action by discarding an emotion card from your hand to place a matching vibe token on any available unlock or upgrade slot for that action. There are 2 restrictions for this. First, you cannot have 2 of the same vibe on an action row, so Haste and Surmount cannot both have a red vibe. Second, the action that is being unlocked or upgraded must be performed immediately after the unlock or upgrade, though an upgrade does not have to be done, so you can upgrade Move Spirit with Haste, but then only perform the base action, but you cannot upgrade Fortify with Raise and then move. Because this ability is immediately followed with a spirit board action, it cannot be performed after the player's third action.
The second set of abilities available during a player's turn are the Ambition abilities. There are 3 Ambition abilities. Add a vibe token of your choice to unlock or upgrade a spirit action, rotate the origin 1 clockwise turn, and take an additional action. Let's go into some details regarding these abilities. To add a vibe token to an unlock or upgrade slot for a spirit action, spend 1 ambition, take a vibe token of your choice, and place it on an available unlock or upgrade slot of your choice. This ability still has the same vibe placement restriction that no two vibe tokens can match on any action row, but the benefit is that no card must be discarded and the action does not have to be taken immediately. To rotate the origin, you must spend 1 ambition and then rotate the origin exactly 1 turn clockwise. Taking an additional action costs 2 ambition and allows you to take any spirit board or realm action according to the normal restrictions. All 3 of these ambition abilities can be used in any order and at any time during your turn, but only once each. So, for example, you cannot rotate the origin more than once per turn.
The final ability is the Absorb ability. This allows you to take willpower from an adjacent origin sphere. We will explain adjacency shortly, but first it is important to know how to perform this ability. When performing the Absorb ability, the first step is to flip the action tracker on your spirit board to its inactive side to serve as a reminder that this ability has already been used. Next, you will choose one adjacent origin sphere. From this sphere, first take 2 willpower, as this is the base amount that you will always get unless there is only 1 willpower left in the chosen sphere. After taking the base 2 willpower, take an additional 1 willpower from the sphere for each adjacent frontier that your team controls. This means that an Absorb ability can yield anywhere from 1 to 4 willpower, depending on adjacency conditions and the chosen sphere's remaining willpower. As has been mentioned, if a sphere has fewer remaining willpower than what you are supposed to take, then you will only gain as many as can be taken. Next, you will gain the bonus that is depicted on the sphere.
The bonuses are as follows. For commitment, you can spend 1 willpower to gain 1 ambition. Note that your team can never have more than 3 ambition, so gaining a 4th from this bonus is not possible. Creativity allows you to draw an emotion card from the top of your emotion deck. Humility gives you 1 essence from the general supply. Diligence gives you 2 willpower from the general supply, not from the sphere. And knowledge allows you to add a vibe token of your choice to any available spirit action slot following the same rules as the ambition vibe placement ability. Then, if an origin sphere is emptied with this ability, score a revelation. We will go into details about that shortly. Finally, rotate the origin 1 turn clockwise and continue with your turn.
Once you have finished your 3 actions, plus any abilities you wish to use, it is the end of your turn. Now, you must either draw 2 emotion cards from your deck or gain 1 ambition. During this time, if you have 0 willpower, gain 1 willpower from the general supply. Finally, flip your action tracker back to its active side if you used your Spirit's Absorb ability, and move it back to the beginning of its track. Now, let us discuss adjacency.
When you have your spirit on a frontier space, as shown here, your spirit is only adjacent to this 1 emotion slot on the frontier and not adjacent to either of these 2 emotion slots. Your spirit is also adjacent to the realm space on either side of the frontier and to the frontier spaces on either side. So, if your spirit is on a frontier and you wish to take a move action, your spirit has 4 possible destinations. While on a frontier, the spirit is also adjacent to the fortress locations in the realms to either side. When using the Absorb ability from a frontier space, your spirit can take willpower from either of 2 origin spheres, not both, and your spirit is only able to gain 1 additional willpower at most because it is adjacent to only that 1 frontier.
When your spirit is on a realm space, as shown here, it is adjacent to only the emotion slots on either side of the realm. Your spirit is also adjacent to the frontier spaces to either side, and the 1 fortress location in the realm. In terms of movement, your spirit can only move to those 2 frontier spaces. The haste upgrade is required to move from 1 realm space to another. When using the Absorb ability from a realm space, your spirit can only take willpower from 1 origin sphere. Because a realm is adjacent to 2 frontiers, it is possible for your spirit to gain 2 additional willpower if you use the Absorb ability in a realm where your team controls both adjacent frontiers.
When calculating control of a frontier, you examine the emotion cards located within that frontier's triad. A triad is the group of 3 cards that includes the emotion on the frontier and those to either side of it. Calculate the total intensity of each team's emotions within that triad, and whichever team has the higher intensity gains control of the frontier. Remember that you only use the intensity that is below the rightmost essence for each emotion. This should be recalculated any time that an emotion card or essence is added or removed from a triad. Do not forget to include any intensity tokens that might be present on an emotion card. If a team has control of a frontier, place a frontier control marker with that team's color facing up.
Realm control can be influenced in a few different ways. Primarily, this is through the emotions that are in the realm's emotion slots. If there is no emotion in a realm slot, or if a team has an emotion in the realm slot and in the frontier slot immediately next to it, then the intensity of the emotion in the frontier slot is also used to calculate realm control. However, if the emotion in the frontier slot does not match the team of the one that is in the realm slot, then the emotion is blocked and does not influence realm control. As with the frontiers, do not forget to include any bonus intensity markers that might be present on any relevant emotions. After the intensity of all emotions has been calculated, add in any additional intensity from a present fortress. If a team has control of a realm, place a realm control marker with the controlling team's color facing up.
As mentioned before, if an origin sphere is emptied, a revelation is triggered. The first step in scoring a revelation is to have both teams reveal their hidden aspirations and to check if either team successfully completed both their hidden aspiration and the common aspiration. If the teams tie, then the aspiration is not scored. Your team can only score your own hidden aspiration, so it does not matter if the opposing team wins your hidden aspiration, as they cannot score anything for it. Here is a brief explanation of the possible aspirations. The aspiration of attitude is won by controlling more realms than the other team. The aspiration of openness is won by controlling more frontiers. The aspiration of awareness is won by having emotions belonging to your team in more triads. Note that if a team has more than one emotion in a triad, it wouldn't matter as only the first is counted for scoring the aspiration. The aspiration of liveliness is won by having more total essence on your emotions than the other team. The aspiration of versatility is won by having emotions on the board with more different vibes than the other team. Remember that brightness and bleakness emotions do not have a vibe and therefore do not count toward this aspiration. The aspiration of fortitude is won by having more total intensity bonuses from fortresses than the other team. So a major fragment with an intensity bonus of +2 is equivalent to 2 minor fragments, as their total intensity bonus would also be 2. The aspiration of unity is won by having a longer, unbroken chain of emotions than the other team.
Please note that the longest chain of emotions for each team is their unity, so a team cannot have two unities of various sizes. If a team has two chains that are of equal sizes, then they have two unities. This is important when dealing with certain emotion powers. Also note that if there is a tie for the aspiration of unity with each team's longest unity, then no one scores the aspiration. There are no secondary unities or tiebreakers that come into play.
Because the aspirations of sensibility and reflection are not used in the basic game, we will not be discussing them here. These will be discussed later in this video when we discuss the full game.
If you scored both your hidden aspiration and the common aspiration, then place a major fragment onto the identity located at the center of the origin. If you scored only one aspiration, regardless of whether it is a hidden or a common aspiration, then place a minor fragment onto the identity. It is possible for two teams to score a fragment, however, two teams cannot both score a major fragment. If at any point you cannot place a particular fragment of any size onto the identity because they are all already on the identity or on the main board as fortresses, then you place your capping fragment, and game end scoring is initiated, which will be discussed shortly. If both teams simultaneously meet the requirements to score a capping fragment, the team that initiated the revelation places theirs, and the other team gains 4 points, which can be marked on the Wheel of Intentions.
If game end is not initiated, flip the just scored common aspiration face down and choose a new aspiration as follows. If a team scored a major fragment, the opposing team must flip one common aspiration face down to remove it from the game. This can be any aspiration that is still available to be scored during the course of the game. Whether or not this happens, the leftmost face-up common aspiration is now the active common aspiration.
Each team will now draw new hidden aspirations. If you did not score any aspirations during the revelation, then draw your next top 3 hidden aspirations, choose one that does not match the common aspiration, and then reshuffle the other 2 back into the deck. Otherwise, simply use the next card in your deck as your active hidden aspiration, again making sure to draw one different from the common aspiration. Once the new aspirations are determined, check to see if the emptied origin sphere has an adjacent fortress that was placed or exalted earlier than the current turn. Note that raising a fortress from a major to a minor fragment does not impact whether or not it is added to the origin. If there is a valid fortress, then it is placed onto the identity and the modifying marker is removed from the realm. It does not matter if the fragment belongs to the team that initiated the revelation. Because this is separate from the aspirations, it is possible to score 0 aspirations but still place a fragment on the identity during a revelation. If a fortress is added to the identity and its modifying token removed from the realm, remember to recalculate realm control. Finally, refill the emptied origin sphere back up to 7 willpower, spin the origin 1 turn clockwise, and continue with your turn.
In the basic game, there are 2 ways to initiate game end. Either a team is unable to place the required fragment onto the identity, or there are no more common aspirations left to be scored. If either of these 2 conditions are met, then the current player will finish their turn and then the game is over and final scoring takes place. It is possible that the game will end with some players having more total turns than others. Final scoring is quick and straightforward and is totaled on each team's Wheel of Intentions. A team receives 5 points for every major fragment and 3 points for every minor fragment on the identity. Add an additional 4 points if a capping fragment is scored. Note that none of your fragments that are still on the board as fortresses count for endgame points. Whichever team has the higher score is the winner. If scores are tied, then the win goes to whichever team has their capping fragment on the identity. If the scores are tied and neither team has placed their capping fragment, then the game simply ends in a tie.
Before we end the basic game rules and get into the full game's additions and modifications, let's also tell you how to play the game with 2 to 3 players. In this situation, instead of having 1 or 2 players control 2 spirits each, you may choose to play with a shaper. A shaper is a single spirit that represents bliss or gloom on its own. Although a single spirit will not be able to cover as much distance as 2 spirits, it receives the compensation of having all resources and ambition concentrated in one hand. When playing with a single shaper, the following changes to setup need to be made. You will select a single spirit from your chosen side and take both its miniature or standee and its spirit board from the box. For player order, you will go second and fourth, placing your spirit's player order markers accordingly. Assemble a single deck using either the pre-built deck for your team or spirit, or one that you build following the deck building rules in the rulebook. Your deck will still only have 16 emotion cards. You will still start with the same resources, 2 essence, 4 willpower, and 0 ambition, as you would if you were not playing as a shaper. Your starting emotions will be placed according to the same rules as were discussed earlier, only without placing a second spirit.
In a 2-player game where both players are using a shaper, the only additional change will be that you will randomly decide which shaper will go first. That player will then turn over their action tracker to its inactive side and start with 2 extra willpower, just as would be done for the first player in any other game.
Now that we have explained how a basic game is set up and played, please feel free to click the video link in the description below to view a partial playthrough of the basic game. Don't worry if you are not completely comfortable with everything we have described, as we will be explaining a lot of the rules in that video.
The rest of this video, however, will deal with the full game. Because the full game and the basic game are very much alike, we will only be discussing what is done differently from what has already been explained.
First, we'll discuss the game setup. In the full game, both teams will place their point counters onto their respective Wheel of Intentions. The Common Aspirations row includes all 9 common aspirations, including the aspiration of reflection and the aspiration of sensibility. This is also true of both teams' hidden aspiration decks.
Let's quickly explain these last 2 aspirations. The aspiration of sensibility is won by having the most intense emotion on the board. This includes any modifying tokens on the emotion. The aspiration of reflection is won by controlling the most opposite realm frontier pairs. These are the pairs that are directly across from each other on the board.
There are no other changes to the main board setup. Each spirit's power will now be used, so it is important to take this into account when choosing your spirit.
You also have more freedom and therefore more strategic and tactical potential in your gameplay. You may use the B side of your spirit boards with asymmetric action upgrades for your spirit. Everyone must use the same side for their spirit boards. but the team board does not need to match either the spirit board or the opposing team's side. Instead of placing your 4 Wild Vibe tokens onto the Move, Invoke, Quell, and Fortify base actions on your spirit board, you may place them onto whichever actions or upgrades you wish to have unlocked at the start of the game. Remember that an upgrade can only be unlocked if its base action is also unlocked. You can also unlock and use the Empower action and its upgrades, which allow you to turn your mild emotion cards into strong emotions with better abilities, which means Bliss and Gloom's strong emotions should be placed within easy reach of their teams.
Empower allows you to bring into play an adjacent mild emotion strong counterpart, so long as that mild emotion has the minimum essence for its Empower threshold for 3 willpower. After taking an Empower action, it is important to check Realm or Frontier control, as the strong emotions tend to have higher intensity values. Be sure to also check if the strong emotion has an ability that triggers as soon as it enters play, or if it has an ongoing effect. The first upgrade available for Empower is Channeled Power, which allows you to also spend 1 ambition to add 1 essence to the mild emotion from the general supply before finishing the Empower action. Note that this upgrade can only be used if an empty essence space is available, and this does allow you to empower a mild emotion that would otherwise be below the Empower threshold. The second upgrade is Emotional Outburst, which, for the cost of 1 additional willpower, allows you to empower a mild emotion that meets or exceeds the Empower threshold from anywhere on the board. The third upgrade, Determination, again, is always the same on the A side and allows you to perform the action with a discount of 1 willpower.
Finally, let's go over intentions. Intentions are short term goals that score points, provide bonuses, and can add up to potentially trigger game end. These short term goals are shown on each side's team board and are different on the A and B sides. The first intention scored in a turn earns you 1 point, and every subsequent intention scored in the same turn earns you 2 points. Points are earned and tracked on each team's Wheel of Intentions, which, upon reaching different point values, has bonuses such as earning 1 essence from the general supply, drawing an emotion card, or flipping 1 ambition to its available side, if possible. Should the point counter reach 20, Game End is triggered. If Game End is triggered this way, you would continue with the rest of your turn, including earning additional points with intentions. If additional intentions are earned, you will track them by continuing to move the counter around the wheel, so 1 is 21 points. At the end of your turn, final scoring begins. Your final score is determined by adding the points from the fragments you placed on the identity, if any, to those that you have on your Wheel of Intentions.
If Bliss still has Satisfaction in play on the main board, then Bliss will score 2 points for every major fragment and 1 point for every minor fragment that they have as fortresses at game end. Remember that Satisfaction's ability does not compound, so if there are 2 copies present, only 1 will count.
If you'd like to see a partial playthrough of a full game of Cerebria, click the link in the description below.
Thank you for watching this Tabletop Tutorials rules explanation. We hope you now have a better understanding of the rules for both the basic and full games of Cerebria, the Inside World. If you have questions about any specific rules in Cerebria, check out the rules forum on Board Game Geek, where many knowledgeable and friendly players will be happy to help you. You can also feel free to reach out to us in the comments section or via the links in the description with any questions.
Cerebria was designed by Victor Peter and Ricard Amon and is published by Mindclash Games. You can find more information about Cerebria, as well as Mindclash Games' other games, at mindclashgames.com. Links to these sites are posted in the video description below. Thanks again for watching, and happy gaming!